Let's talk Heineken Champions Cup this weekend. You are doing Munster against Gloucester in Thomond Park.
Yeah, on Saturday afternoon, and I'll be looking at Leinster Toulouse on Sunday as well. I'm really looking forward to Saturday. There's always a really special feeling around Thomond Park when Munster are at home in the Heineken Champions Cup for the first time of the season, and given what they achieved at Sandy Park last weekend, there will be a real level of expectation now, because it's a brilliant start. And was listening to Wednesday Night Rugby last week when Matt Williams was on off the ball and saying that if they leave Sandy Park with a point, that'll be a pretty good opening. They'll be pretty happy with having come from one of the most difficult places to go. Although I'm starting to wonder how difficult is it to go there. That the last two Irish teams have left with 6 points between them. Leinster went there and won last year. Yes, the best team in Europe, obviously, and Munster have gone and minus 3 or 4 of their best players, nailed down starting players.
Are we in one of those phases where we critically overrate the Gallagher Premiership?
I don't think there's anybody overrating the Gallagher Premiership at the moment.
I was going to trolley a little bit, going, ooh, maybe it's time that we had a serious consideration of asking the English clubs to leave European competition until they actually get their shit together, like we kind of have done with the Italians. It's not fair having an English team in your pool. It kind of skews the group a little bit.
There is an awful lot of dross in the Premiership at the moment, and it's the case for a number of reasons. But if you look at the teams that played the Irish provinces last weekend, 3 matches, no wins, and one absolute horror show from Wasps, particularly in that second half, obviously. But you take the top 2 out of it, Saracens and Exeter Chiefs, I think they've only dropped a point out of the 30 available to them. I think they're both on 29 points out of 30. And the next best team is Wasps, who were destroyed by Leinster. Exeter couldn't beat Munster at home, and Leicester have been beaten at home by an Ulster side that had their backsides handed to them by Connacht the week previous to that. Connacht playing in the Challenge Cup this season. The Premiership is not in a good place at the moment. Saracens are probably on their way back. I think people talking about the Exeter Chiefs as a potential threat to the likes of Leinster as a European Champions Cup winner at the end of the season, it's way off the mark.
Munster are the closest threat at the moment, right?
I don't know if they're the closest threat to Leinster at the moment, but they're, Munster are potential semi-finalists, because the way they're playing...
Who is number 2?
That I don't know. Racing probably, because Racing came so close to beating Leinster last year, and they'll always have the money to be able to go out and buy whoever they need to bring in, and they're going reasonably well in the top 14 at the moment, and they will be steeling themselves for another crack off Leinster given how close they came. They're probably the number 2, but a traditional European heavyweight in Claremont aren't even in the competition. Saracens are trying to rebuild after they went backwards after winning their 2 in a row. Toulon are nowhere at the moment, albeit they're going well in the top 14, but they're so far from that 3 in a row winning team. There isn't an awful lot of depth in the European Champions Cup at the moment when you've got a team of such quality. That's Leinster. But I love the way the Scarlets play, and they got to a semi-final last year. I think they'll be just as good, albeit they've lost Tyg Byrne, who was a massive part of what they achieved over the last couple of years. But albeit it's only October, it's very hard to see where the definitive threat is coming from. If Leinster are playing a quarter-final at the Aviva Stadium, and if the draw goes their way and they're playing a semi-final at the Aviva Stadium...
Even if they're playing away now, you would kind of feel like, no one is actually going to have their home ground. Leinster fans will travel in big numbers to wherever the semi-final is. You just can't see any team, assuming fitness, right? If Sexton goes down, or if Sexton's unavailable for a semi-final, a quarter-final, semi-final, there is still a significant gap to burn at 10. But maybe over the course of the season he closes that gap.
But that's the only position where that gap exists. So I would even say Andrew Porter to Tyg Furlong isn't as big a gap as it once was. Certainly the Tyg Furlong loss, it would be felt because he's Tyg Furlong, but it wouldn't be as keenly felt as any other team if they had Tyg Furlong in their team. I think Johnny Sexton is the only position that Leinster lose that can hurt them or present some sort of Achilles heel to them going deep into this competition.
But even still, we don't know. We don't know how close Ross Byrne is to be
man of the match in the last game of
article.
Yeah, but actually, he wasn't the best 10 on the field that night. That was just a bad decision for the man of the match. Joey Carver was better than him, and James Lowe was the man of the match.
He wasn't bad, Ross Byrne.
No, he was good.
And his kicking is now metronomic. He has improved that as well, and he is a traditional goal-kicking fly half now that you can definitely rely on to come up with the big kicks in the big moments.
I think the other thing too is that a lot of the players have still to find their best form. Henshaw's performance in Europe was his best performance of the year. The week before he'd been grand. So there is still kind of a cresting for the team to do collectively, where they all where the full team gets out for a full game and plays.
I would say they're a bit off their peak, because There is still so much experience to be gained by the likes of James Ryan, for example, who is in his second season as a professional rugby player, yet to lose a game for Leinster rugby. Tyke Furlong.
Trevor Hogan would say, when his man strength comes in, it's going to be interesting.
Well, it's a very good way of putting it. James Lowe is only going to become more accustomed to playing in this part of the world. Jordan Larmour he's pretty much just out of nappies, Jordan Larmour, and he's already got a trophy full of medals over there that he has to look after on a weekly basis and keep polished. There are so many young guys, Andrew Porter you've already mentioned, that are just going to get better and better, and Dan Levy's going to get another year experience under his belt. I think they could be 18 months to 2 years away from being at the absolute peak level they can be at.
True. I wonder about the midfield when you mentioned Henshaw there. Is there a sense that we've underrated the Ringrose and Henshaw partnership up until this point? Because I thought they were absolutely imperious last Friday night, where it was like, if we had a conversation 12 months ago about Ringrose and Henshaw potentially being as good as Darcy and O'Driscoll, you'd get laughed out of the room.
You wouldn't have.
Do you not think so?
I don't think you would. I don't think anybody would have laughed at you, because I think that everybody feels like look at how amazing they are at this stage. I think Ringrose.
I'll put it to you this way. When people talk about Leinster and the parts that are absolutely essential, that are world class, best in their role, they talk about Tyke Furlong, they talk about Johnny Sexton. I think Robbie Henshaw and Gary Ringrose as a pair are entering that sphere.
So we haven't had a chance to overrate them because they have played so little rugby together as a pair.
As well.
We were looking forward to Gary Ringrose returning to fitness at the Six Nations last year, or this year, it seems so long ago. And thankfully he did return when he did, because we lost both Chris Farrell and Robbie Henshaw over the space of 2 games. Henshaw did his shoulder, so we never actually got to see the two of them play together in last year's Six Nations. And there's always been an injury to one or both, with either their provincial side or the international side. Now you're seeing like Ringrose was superb on Friday, but he was probably outshone by Henshaw, who was magnificent from start to finish. And had James Lowe not been on the field, he probably would have been the man of the match. And they are just going to get better as a partnership. So the age profile is right. The callousness of some of the combinations is only going to improve as well. The back row competition is absolutely ridiculous in a year in which they've had no Sean O'Brien, no Jamie Heaslip, and Jordy Murphy has gone to Ulster.
Caelan Doris yet to come into the equation.
Max
Deegan yet to come into the equation
get an
properly.
Opportunity.
I wonder, is there at some point where the Schools Cup becomes a pre-draft tournament and there is a draft in Irish rugby?
It's not a bad idea, actually, because that is literally the one and only conveyor belt.
The academy system, like, you don't own the players, you just train them up to a certain level, and that every year whoever finishes the lowest if the Irish teams in the provinces gets the picks.
We should do a mock draft at the end of this school season. Get Rory O'Connor and Cian Tracy and get it because they know the schools game, and let's pick a mock draft and see where they are in a couple of years. I mean, it's not a bad idea.
Because it's far more annoying when you actually bring a player through the system, get him in your first team, and then they go, oh, we'll have him now. But it would be like, no, you can actually take him from 18, pay him, train him.
Well, the difference between that and being, in the NFL or the NBA, for example, is that the academy system is triggered before these guys are leaving school, whereby,
But all the work is done in the school at that level.
But these guys, the majority of it. But these guys are they've still been brought into the academy system a couple of years earlier than that. So you would have to then cut that part of the academy system out of the system.
No, you keep that part of the academy. And so you're saying to the provinces.
So what's in it for the provinces then, if they could just then lose it to Munster or Connacht or Ulster?
Because you get one back, you get to pick.
So you get the first pick the next year.
No, you pick, as you always do in a draft, on the basis of your senior team's performance, right?
So Leinster would never have first pick in the draft?
Never, unless they have a couple of bad seasons.
To be fair, it's fourth pick. It's not exactly scraping the barrel.
Yeah, but if you desperately need a 10 and you've had another European Cup winning campaign, but Johnny Sexton has decided for personal reasons that he is taking a permanent step away from the game, and you're like, well, we've lost our 10, and this superstar is just coming out of Blackrock College, and he's going to be playing for Connacht next season.
Then you trade a pick. You go, we've got 3 wingers and 4
I mean,
number
Joe Schmidt
7s.
trades the pick.
No, the clubs trade
Joe
the pick.
Schmidt would just be like a puppet.
David Nucifora is the puppet master.
This is like a nightmare situation to David Nucifora, a draft out of schools.
No, it's exactly the type of thing he'd love.
Really?
Yeah, he'd be like...
Does he not want the kind of, if he had his way, handpick which province each player goes to?
Well, ultimately, the phone call will be made, yeah, you're picking this guy, yeah, you're picking this guy, yeah, you're picking this guy.
Draft. The only phone calls that should be made should be live on ESPN when somebody from Blackrock College is getting his call saying you've been signed up for Connacht.
Oh, man!
Hey, that's unfair. If they got their first pick a couple of years in a row, they would be then the Champions Cup
here's
team.
the point, right? But get them into the system at 18 as opposed to at 23.
But I know this is just all hypothetical speculation and chat, and we're having a bit of crack here. But if you were to go down such a route, then you are officially administering the kiss of death to the provincial system as a traditional rivalry-based series of games. So it matters not where you are from, where you went to school, what club you may have come through, how much you detested or otherwise Leinster as a kid. You just could potentially wind up playing for any of the 4 provinces, not out of necessity, but because that is the way the system dictates.
You know that Leinster would be it would almost never happen that Leinster would be picking players from outside, because they have, what has happened is that there is a school system which is producing far too many players into the Leinster system. And so at some point there needs to be rebalancing. And I'm just making the fairly spurious, but not that spurious case, that rebalancing them earlier in their careers and making the provinces be responsible and building up that affinity as an 18-year-old to a 23-year-old, when you're kind of like, you go over there and you live there, and as opposed to floating around the Leinster system.
I think that rebalancing is beginning to happen organically.
But it's happening very late in people's careers.
But it's going to happen earlier and earlier. Like Joey Carberry's in his early 20s. He's the example now that will be held up by an awful lot of people. Andrew Conway, he wasn't exactly over the hill or even close to being over the hill when we went down to Munster. I think you're going to see more and more of that. And it will get younger and younger.
Wouldn't it be better if it happened at 18? And like whatever the process is, like it's obviously not going to be.
Give these guys an opportunity to make it in their home province, and make sure that you've got the right measures in place whereby...
If you're Max Egan or Keelan Doris coming through now, so they're back rowers if anybody's unfamiliar with them, and both unbelievably highly rated. Deegan was like one of the highest rated. Jenny Heaslip used to talk in breathless tones about him, and apparently Doris is even better according to people within the system. In front of you, you have the three of the best sevens in the Northern Hemisphere in Van der Fleer, O'Brien, and who's the third seven I'm missing? Levy. You've got Fardy as a 6, who is kind of a second row, but also really a 6 for Leinster. You also have Rhys Ruddock, and your 8 is Jack Conan. Is there somebody else I'm missing here? Definitely missing somebody else.
O'Brien could be the 8 as well, and Jordy Murphy was the 8 last year.
Yeah, so they've already taken Jordy Murphy out of the system. But like,
can you Google Max Deegan for me there and tell me how old he is? I think he's 22. But if the agents of these players are doing their job, and obviously all of these guys are renegotiating either their academy contracts or their senior professional contracts.
On the 1st of October, he turned 22.
Every year or two, they should be looking around and speaking. Now that the chains of tradition and that parochialism are being diluted, I think the system will endure a natural, organic rebalancing.
Wouldn't a draft be class?
It'd be amazing. It'd be brilliant television.
Wouldn't it? Wouldn't it actually?
Like, I know that's just for us, but it'd be great.
Wouldn't it ramp up the schools game that little bit further?
It would. I was just going to say that you wouldn't have necessarily got the knowledge of these guys that you would have from NCAA level coming through college.
The games are on their sports.
But it may lead to more and more people watching them. But the problem is you're looking at the Leinster Schools Cup and you're not really looking at the other 3. That's
why you declare for the draft, and like everybody, that's why the issue is there. Like,
but like also you have like a separate identity then, and I know it kind of just feeds down into schools, perhaps hunting talent at a very, very early age.
Doing that already.
I know they, but like you look at the NFL, like I don't think anybody who's playing for Ohio State is like, oh, I want to play for the Cleveland Browns, or anybody who's playing for Michigan says he wants to play for the Detroit Lions, or in Miami wanting to play for the Dolphins. Like that becomes a separate thing, and that culture shift would eventually happen in rugby, where that idea of going to Blackrock and then the next step being Leinster would probably be eradicated over time.
I don't know. The link is too strong.
That's not necessarily
not eradicated, but diluted. To the point where these guys just want to be professional rugby players. Yes, they want to play for Leinster, but you're not going to rule out doing something else. And the big switch, it was almost Luke Fitzgerald a couple of years ago. The biggest switch now has been Joey Carberry. Like, anything is possible now. A guy who was brought up on a thigh, steeped in the Leinster tradition, was schooled under Johnny Sexton, coached by Joe Schmidt, both at provincial and senior level, at international level, and he has gone.
He looks great in red. That's the key point here.
Nothing is off the table anymore.
No, I just and it would be like I think though that at least if there was some kind of formal, here's the point where you have to get them, as opposed to we'll let you do all the work, we'll let you put them on the fringe of your team, and then we'll go, oh, thanks very much lads, it's much better for us if we take them out of your system.
That's Munster, Connacht and Ulster. But then you would I think if you're in a position where a superstar has come through Pres Cork or has come through, you know, one of the big rugby playing schools in Connacht or up in Belfast, and next of all they're starting for Leinster the following season.
They'll never start for Leinster. Leinster will never pick
outside. But maybe they needed a 10 at that time.
I would say that if you're in the AIL, you can enter the draft as well. And maybe there's a point where teams are like, well, at this present moment in time, we need somebody now, quickly, for this season. I'm going to pick the AIL guy over the 17-year-old or the 18-year-olds coming out of Blackrock. Does that then promote the tradition of the AIL and turning that into something that people are watching? I don't know, because this is all fake, but I don't know. Like, could that be a very, very positive consequence?
I think that with those players, they should be able to be walk-ons as seniors, because you've kind of, the late bloomers should be, like, you should be able to go training. You shouldn't have to be kind of siphoned off and outside the academy system.